Shout out to Chuck Connors, yo. Chuck Connors. For everybody that's 50 years old and up, the rifleman. The rifleman. Chuck Connors. And I'm a fan of Chuck Connors, not necessarily for the rifleman, because the rifleman was before my time. But I watched a movie when I was young. It came out in 1979 called Tourist Trap. Now, tourist trap is a term, if you're not familiar, is commonly known as a tourist spot or hangout or venue where you travel and the prices are hiked up and jacked up, mocked up very, very high, to the point where you're basically being gouged. You're being economically gouged. Places that are like super expensive and you don't necessarily get your bang for a buck. It would be commonly in modern times like an Airbnb that you would feel like you were being overcharged at. Like if it's a one room efficiency and they want to charge you like $1,200 a month and you're out in the middle of nowhere, that is a tourist trap. But the movie itself, Tourist Trap, is brilliant. I'm actually going to place it on my Mount Rushmore of most original horror films ever created. First of all, it's PG-13. Second of all, it was the last of the horror film movies to come out before the start of the slasher era, which is your Friday the 13th, Halloween's, Nightmare on Elm Streets, you understand? But this was the beginning of very, very authentic horror and some of the last of very authentic horror. And it wasn't really that the movie was necessarily terrifying as much as the elements of this movie that made it so original, so poignant, so regal. So here's the plot. It's just like any other plot. A group of campers looking for a place to hang out. Car breaks down and they end up where they end up. But Chuck Connors plays the character known as David Slauson. And David Slauson is the villain. He's the villain. But why I say it's not a slasher film is because it doesn't fall under the same auspices of killer wields knife. Antagonist in the movie wields a glove with blades attached. There's no immediate hand-to-hand weapons used by the antagonist in the film. The antagonist has an exceptional gift. The antagonist is psychokinetic. Not only can he move objects with his mind, but he also possesses ventriloquism. He's able to make objects speak and emit sounds. Now, this is very, very unique for your typical horror villain, because he shows up for all intents and purposes as a cowboy, like a cowboy figure. He's much presented almost in his Western regalia as the rifleman, but this is in color. And he's got the overalls, he's got the hat, he's got the museum, he's got all of the trinkets, he's got tons of soldiers, like little army soldiers, army men, tons of dolls, tons of mannequins. In addition to dolls, we'll get to the mannequins in a second, because the mannequins is that's very deep and very original. I don't know if it's been imitated since, where mannequins, not dolls, but mannequins, real store mannequins, like tons of them. So what he did and what he does is fulfills the real meaning of Tourist Trap, but the price that the tourists have to pay is with their lives. So it's the highest price possible. It's not just charging you $1,200 for a one-room flat, but he's costing them their lives for free. They didn't have to pay a dime. Red flag. They didn't have to pay a dime. He just welcomed them in and typical of horror movie flow. This is what in a lot of instances does happen when horror movie scenes are set up, horror movie plots are set up where the travelers end up at some destination. Usually they don't have to pay. Usually they might like stumble upon a cabin, etc. So he's using telekinesis, and he's got all of these objects flying at different people at different times, like knives and hatchets. So he's using a lot of the weapons that your typical horror antagonist use, but he's not using his body necessarily to do it. He's not really using his physicality to take out any protagonist in the movie. So it's two characters. In the movie, these are spoilers. In the movie, you're made to think that Davy and Slauson are two different people. The character known as Davy is who he dresses up as, wearing the mask of one of the mannequins and an outfit to essentially terrorize and take out the characters in the movie. So he shows up and he's the character of Davy. That's the antagonistic dark side of Slauson. Slauson is his last name, but Slauson is who he shows up as on the face. So he's the front persona. He's like the ego, what you want to see on the surface. And what makes that so deep is the last name of a family, and our last names is usually connected to how we present ourselves to the world, which is to say a name that covers us more so than a name that defines us uniquely, such as the first name and or the middle name. But this is the last name. He shows up as Slauson, the last name. As a host, he's Slauson. When he invites the guests, he's Slauson. When he's entertaining the guest, he's Slauson. When he catches either one of them alone, he's Davy. Shows up as Davy. And he would do things in the movie where he's chasing them as Davy, and then all of a sudden the chase stops. And then he shows up in a pickup truck as Slauson to bring them back. So later, when they find out that Davy and Slauson are the same person, then the plot really picks up pace. It's a fast-paced movie anyway, even though it's designed to be slow. But one of the standout features of this movie is the score. The score, the music is very, very, it's so elaborate. It's unlike most horror movies that you see. It's very theatric, and it makes every scene very, very cinematic and very memorable because of all of the theatricality that went into the film. And this was Chuck Connors, as they say. This was him at his best. This was a brilliant night and day performance from the Rifleman. To go from the Rifleman to a DID affected dissociative identity disorder or schizophrenia or multiple personality type of character in a film where he's the villain. And what he does essentially is, when he captures the visitors, he technically turns them into dolls. He does off them, he clips them, but he also puts the masking over them, plaster. And one of the people in the film, he actually takes them out this way, ties her up, and he explains to her what's going to happen to her as he covers her face with plaster, real plaster that you actually make mannequins and or dolls with, like making a mold. But except he's covering the lady's face where she can't move, and consequently she can't breathe. One of the most authentic kills in all of horror movie history, because of the realistic portrayal of the character. Right, he's not Freddy Krueger where you have to go to sleep, and once you enter the dream world, Freddy is basically geokinetic. He can change the whole environment when you're in the dream world. And this is not Jason, somebody that you had to kill 1,000 times and just keeps coming back every time lightning strikes his body. It's not Jason. is not Michael Myers, right? This person shows up without a mask as the villain, as much as he does with a mask as the villain, as the plot builds up and comes to a conclusion. Then you see him in his antagonistic display with and without the mask. And adding ventriloquism into it makes it even more insidious. So what's the big lesson in this movie that I want to take out and edify everybody at the Sigmaversity with? Everybody in the Sigmaverse. Here's the big lessons in this movie. You got the duality. Your shadow side is basically your first name, because on a societal level, you're really known by your last name. When you check out your name in the list of roles, anything official like that, official documents, in a lot of instances, your last name appears first. Your last name appears first. Your last name represents your estate. So he shows up as the estate, right? He doesn't show up as Dave. He shows up as Slauson. He shows up as the estate, the front cover, the surface person, the surface persona, the surface self. But the shadow self, which is connected to the first name, which is connected to the uniqueness of the character, not just Dave, but he's Davey. To add that little insidious, infantile, juvenile edge to it, to make it a nickname. Like, not Raymond, but Ray Ray. You know, not, Pookie. Not whatever, you know what I mean, a long first name would be. Not Preston, but Pookie. You know what I mean? Not Jonathan, but John. He shows up as Davey. And that's the shadow self. But the shadow self, Davey, even though it's his first name, he wears a mask and disguises himself under the identity of his first name. So Dave, which is his first name, is actually the hidden character in the movie who actually offs all of the protagonists in the movie, essentially. But he does that as his first name, which is connected to his shadow self, which is connected to the man with the mask. When he's without the mask, he's wearing his estate, his last name. And where the mannequins come in is the duality and how it presents itself in the marketplace, particularly regarding consumerism. Mannequins being animated, the animated dead once again. The mannequins are lifeless, but the mannequins in the movie sing and they shout and they open their mouths and they fall on you. The mannequins themselves don't commit any harm, you understand, but they're almost like a undead audience, which really adds a very twisted and unique a unique edge to the film that I have not seen repeated in the horror genre. So you have that, and the mannequins connecting you to the store and connecting you to purchasing, to consumerism. So you have consumerism connected to somebody in the shadows who's animating them with ventriloquism. So there's a person that you don't see in the shadows that's making consumerism move. And whoever that is not only hidden, but wears a mask. And he's in control of the products of consumerism. He controls the mannequins. But it's the real life people who actually have to pay the price, because those mannequins were once real people. When one of the girls touches the mannequin, she says, "Oh, it feels like real skin. This feels like real flesh," because at one point it was. At least living animated flesh, Sigmaversity. So, long story short, the protagonist ends up going crazy, and the film ends with her driving down the highway with nothing but mannequins in her car. The top is dropped, and she's cruising like she's getting ready to go to the beach. And all of what we thought were her friends, once were her friends, they're now all mannequins. They've been offed. But because she had been driven crazy by the whole ordeal, she was driving away with mannequins that her friends used to be. This is what consumerism can do. It can cause you to be your shadow self without even knowing it. Without even knowing it, you can be mannequinized. You can be turned into a mannequin. This is what happens when people get turned into products. When you're dealing with your estate versus your shadow self. It's your shadow self, your desires, your hidden urges that are connected to the mannequin, connected to the dolls, connected to the trinkets. Another aside, some of the figurines were Civil War figurines shooting real guns under his psychokinetic control. And Indians throwing hatchets and knives and all of the above. But all of this is connected to the shadow self and connected to the mannequins to let you see the what word am I looking for? The subliminal, the cryptic connection between antagonism and consumerism being communicated by the ventriloquist, psychokinetic person to the mannequins. So that's it in a nutshell. It's called tourist trap. And no matter where you are on the planet, if you're anywhere where you have to consume anything, going to the store, going to the market. And if you're not the owner, you're the tourist. If you're not the owner of the shop or the stores that you go into, you're automatically a tourist. Even if you come every day and they know your order, hey Dave, what you having? Same usual, all right, cool. You're still a tourist because you're not the person who owns the restaurant. You're the visitor. So you're walking up on Slauson based on who you are as Dave, Super T Sigma. I appreciate you for stopping by the Sigmaversity. One love. Catch up with you soon. Oh, be on the lookout for Style Wars 11. Style Wars 11. Coming soon.